Hey guys, we are back with yet another podcast, and again we'll be showing some problems which we saw in a video, which is intelligent design by the crash course. And I have a co-host Jacob with me, so today he'll be helping me to show some of these problems and counterattack them.
Say, I need a getaway. We got that getaway.
Yeah, so hey Jacob.
Hey Piyush, it's a good day to meet up and talk on the podcast.
Yeah,
So we'll get to the topic because I believe this might take some extra time. I mean, we've been wanting to do 5-minute podcast when we started off, but now we've reached the 6 times the size.
30 minutes.
Yeah.
The previous one was
32 minutes.
Yeah.
It was a lot. But we want to present the arguments in the most compelling, comprehensive way without any drawback from its own. And also for those who might be interested in listening to the podcast with your screen turned off, for example, when you're working or when you're walking or driving as such, updating it on a platform, something like a SoundCloud would be very useful for an audio experience.
Yeah.
So if you feel that is something that we should look into, do not forget to leave a comment in the comment section. So if at least 2-3 guys want to do that, then we'll definitely upload our audios onto SoundCloud, and we'll keep you posted on where to look it out for. So any suggestions are highly recommended. And as always, the link to this crash course video would be pasted in the description and also would be popping up in the cards now. Alright, about teleological argument. It basically deals with the question of, is there any purpose behind the universe that we see? Is there any purpose behind creation? Can we see a design behind it? As the crash course itself says, it's nowadays more known as intelligent design. Is it something that is the mere chance of natural selection and evolution, or is it the product of intelligent design? So one of the questions that they raise is that when we look at certain things, we don't see certain meaning behind it. We don't see any purpose behind it because it is flawed. And what they accuse of us is that we look at those meaningless, purposeless entities and we create purpose on our own. So in turn, it is not God who gives purpose or design to this, but because we need to find a purpose, because we are driven by this sort of semi-narcissistic need that I must find purpose, we create purpose on our own. And they go on to say that, so in other words, they subtly hint that the evidence of lack of purpose outweighs the evidence of purpose. That is a quite drastic claim to make, because when we look at the universe in itself, when we will be taking on fine-tuning argument next week, the element of fine-tuning that we see in the universe to necessitate any form of life on Earth is massively vague, and you cannot look at that and say, well, the evidence of lack of purpose outweighs the evidence of purpose. So in other words, just because a clock winds down, it does not mean that no one wound up in the first place. So what we'll be addressing today basically would be some of these arguments as to why those things that seem to not have any purpose later on turned out to be having so much evidence, and in terms of the purpose and design behind it, with scientific curiosity. And it is normally the atheists who slam it on our face and say, well, you theists, you never sign up for scientific curiosity. We are driven by passion for science, we are driven by passion to know, we don't go for God of the gaps argument. But in certain areas, we see it's the Christians who see that purpose in the entire creation and see we need to know more about God's revelation. So let's start off with a simple example. Paleontologist Stephen Jay Gould, he made a claim that, and he cited the Pandas Thumb as an evidence of lack of design. So what he said is that the Pandas Thumb is a clumsy adaptation of a wristband, and so not an intelligent design. So what they do with this is, when they look something within the creation, within the nature, they see that it doesn't look optimal or perfect. So in that case, it can only be attributed to evolution and not the mind of an intelligent designer. So he said, well, the Pandas Thumb does not look something that is specifically designed to help the panda. It looks as if it is a clumsy adaptation of a thumb. So that could be attributed to evolution and not the work of an intelligent creator. But then Peter Gordon, in his work, The Pandas Thumb Revisited, analysis of 2 arguments against design, he claimed that Pandas Thumb is functional and original in design. And this was substantiated by a study by 6 Japanese biologists who used 3D tomography and magnetic resonance to show that in fact the panda's thumb and certain bones of the thumb form double pincer-like apparatus, And what it helps the panda is, it helps the panda to, quote unquote, manipulate objects with great dexterity. So even though it looked different from a thumb, the movement of the bones and the motion of the thumb in itself helps the panda to strip bamboos and use in his daily process with extreme skillfulness and deftness. So this is first example that I would request our viewers to keep in mind. When someone comes along and say, we don't see any purpose or anything as such, you can keep in mind the simple example of how at first people looked at something and said, well, it doesn't suit what we would have in mind for optimal design, and hence is not this evidence for optimal design, and what disproved is further studies. Another hotspot for intelligent design is what is known as junk DNA. Now, junk DNA means DNA that was initially useless or DNA that became useless as time progressed. So what evolutionary biology says that this is DNA that started off, some parts of DNA that started off as being absolutely useless without any purpose, or they say that certain parts of DNA were useless in previous species, but as we evolved, the usefulness of that DNA was removed, and now it's a remnant and inactive DNA, but it no longer serves any purpose. So they used to rule out any study into junk DNA because it's useless. What's the point of it? It's just a byproduct of evolution and natural selection. But Christian scientists predominantly and other scientists argue that, well, there could be something behind it. Let's keep on searching it. For to the Christian eye, he had a hope. The Creator would not leave something behind that did not have any purpose at all. And these designs and these things that we come across would be more evidence for the Creator God. And so they kept on working into it. And now we have data from the Human Genome Project, which helped scientists from the Case Western Reserve School of Medicine in Cleveland, Ohio, to present a function for junk DNA. Now, one of the junk DNA is called Lyon DNA, and it did not make sense, like much of the junk DNA, as to why it is present. But Lyon DNA is now understood to play a role in creating human diversity. What it does is it alters gene expression patterns which affect organisms' characteristics. And even the introduction time phase of Lyon DNA in mammals, it points to a purpose by the designer. So something that seemed early as useless is now turning out to be very crucial in generating human diversity.
Yeah.
And even research from the University of British Columbia shows that at present what we think about junk DNA is not exactly junk. And let me refer to one more study, a recent study by Pandas Polak and Eytan Domany. They show that alu elements, now this is a type of junk DNA, that alu elements affect heart development, muscle development, brain development, central neuron system development, pancreas development, and stress response development. And the ENCODE project, which is a massive DNA project, it showed that 80% of junk DNA that we once understood to be junk DNA plays a crucial role in the human body. And Dr. Fazal Rana, biologist at reasonstobelieve.org, he claims that the insight of this research can lead to treatment and reversal of debilitating human diseases. Now, alongside this, I would like to point to a study by the Australian Institute of Tropical Health and Medicine. I'm citing this because there is a disease known as a thigh liver fluke, and often people ask, why does God allow something like the thigh liver fluke to take place in this world and affect millions and thousands of lives in Thailand on a yearly basis?
Yes.
So if you trace back as to how this disease spreads, you can trace it back to the dietary systems, you can trace it back to the cuisine, you can trace it back to the sanitation, you can trace it back. These all inability of the people to maintain standard in these aspects have led to the thigh liver fluke. But again, they don't need to ask that. They just want to point at why would God, a loving God, an omnibenevolent God, place this.
Yeah. They just, without knowing the exact reason, and
it's all about taking it out.
But then they're just finding reasons to blame God for
yes,
it. So.
Exactly. So even keeping the human failures in meeting certain standards and responsibility on the side, the thigh liver fluke is in turn helping us in another way. Now, as I touted, the Australian Institute of Tropical Health and Medicine said that the suffering caused by thigh liver fluke may hold key to effectively treating slow and non-healing wounds caused by diabetes.
Oh.
So something that is destructive on one hand because of human incapacity and because of human incapability, the God is using it around and functioning it so that now it can be used to treat other forms of weakness in our body.
Wow.
Now, one key principle that we need to address is when people bring up this argument of teleology, that there is no design in the universe, what they expect to show is that, or what they hold fundamentally is that a perfect creator must have a perfect creation. Now, does the Bible hold on to a view that a perfect creator must have a perfect creation, or whether the universe is perfect? Now, the Bible does not assume that. The Bible says that we are in a fallen world where the world itself is subject to the pervasive law of decay.
True.
And that is evident from the second law of thermodynamics, where the energy and the efficiency of the universe is running down.
Yes.
The Bible does not say that the universe is perfect or the creation is perfect. And you can read about the Bible hinting about the second law of thermodynamics in Romans 8 verse 21. Also, an omnipotent and a free creator has the choice to either create a perfect or an imperfect creation. It is not. It is a non sequitur to say that a perfect creator ergo must create a perfect creation. And also, one point that we need to keep in mind is optimality. That is what we meaning with when we say about intelligent design. We're looking at optimality. Optimality coherently requires compromise of competing aspects, because the law of non-contradiction is grounded in the immutable logos.
Yeah.
So, in the general sense of optimality, there will be certain points that need to be compromised, but that complete sense of optimality will be achieved nonetheless. And now we will be looking at the example of the eye and the blind spot issue that Crash Course brings up, and we'll show that even though God makes certain cuts in different parts, the entire optimality of the human eye is far greater than we can ever comprehend. And like again, remember this key point that a perfect creator does not need to create a perfect creation. It is not a burden upon him to do that. He is free to do that. And we know that the perfect creation was created, which is subject to the fall of man and is now under pervasive decay.
Yes.
So, what's up with the blind spot? What is the issue with all of it? In vertebrate eyes, like our eyes, the light sensing cells point towards the back of the retina, and the nerve cells that transmit signals is placed in between the source of the light and the light sensing cells. So these nerve cells cause an impediment that in turn causes the blind spot. But this does not happen to be the case in cephalopods, or for example squids or octopus. So the question they ask is, why didn't God create our human eyes with like cephalopods? Or does God care more about squids and octopuses than he cares about humans? First and foremost, the argument of blind spot is quite redundant argument.
Yeah.
And I don't know why Crash Course keeps on doing this, that they bring up old and tested and failed arguments. Because if you look at Richard Dawkins, when he wrote the book The Blind Watchmaker in 1986, if I'm right, by 1984 so much of evidence had come up in scientific literature that all that he had tried to show off in 1986 in his book had been thwarted well and heavily in the scientific literature. But now there's a lot to unpack here as we move into it, but let's stay close. Again, if you search online and see how to identify whether you have a blind spot, you have to strain a lot, create a very restricted environment, and then test and see whether you have a blind spot. So if you're driving a car, suddenly you won't miss out the lorry that's in front of you. Suddenly you don't happen to see what's on your left eye or your right eye. That does not happen with blind spot.
Yeah.
Blind spot, you can only test it out when you're, when you like.
But then that's what they said in the Crash Course video.
About the accidents.
Yeah.
But when I don't come across blind spot ever in my life. If you have a normal functioning eye, you don't come across blind spots normally. It's when you have diseases or that goes on that can magnify the blind spot. So if you go online and search how to find out if you have a blind spot, this is what they'll do. On the screen they will be putting an O and an X at a particular distance. They'll ask you to close your right eye, and they'll ask you to look at the X on the right side. And the next step is crucial. You need to concentrate on the X and slowly keep moving your head towards the screen. As you move towards at a particular distance, the O on the left side will move out of your vision. You won't notice the O. And you keep on moving towards X, and suddenly the O will pop back into vision. So you should notice the O only with your periphery vision.
Wow.
If you stop concentrating on the X and looks with your left eye on O, you will find the O again.
Strange but interesting.
So yeah, but so it shows that how extremely dedicated you have to be to identify the fault in your eye. And if you search online, I try to search online for blind spot creating accidents. The only thing that I could come across would be the blind spot in cars that create accidents. If you don't turn back and look over your shoulders, you may not see the vehicle behind you.
Yes.
That is the only thing I could see. Nothing about blind spot causing people's death or anything as such. But then again, crash course, they try to dwell
deliberately.
and also they also try to make use of the lack of research that the viewers might do. If viewers are just going to gulp it down, then that's good for them. They don't have to go into much research, and no one is going to counter them. That's where we come in, by the way. And so now let's talk about some of the key parts of the eye as to understand why the design of the eye is amazing. The eye requires lots of energy and nutrients, and also it has the highest metabolism of organ in any mammals. The eye is so powerful that it can elicit an electrical response with the presence of a single photon.
Wow.
Okay, so single photon is the smallest unit of light.
Yes.
So with the presence of a single photon, the eye can catch that presence. And now it is used by quantum technology to create biometrics in defense labs. So now coming into how the eye functions, 3/4 of the blood supply that comes to the eye is brought through capillaries known as choriocapillaries. Okay, and this is placed behind the retina. Alright, so this is behind the retina, keep that in mind. And the contents from the choriocapillaries reach the light sensing cells through another intermediate layer known as retinal pigment epithelium, RPE. Two parts, two of these organic elements are very critical to how we show that the eye is optimally designed. Now, what is the function of the RPE? Can we just throw away the RPE? Well, we can't. The first function is that the RPE is dark pigment because it carries blood as such.
Yes.
It absorbs scattered light and fine-tunes the vision that we have. So it enhances vision. Second thing is that it removes toxins. So what happens is that the photoreceptor cells is stacked up by different discs, and periodically it sheds those discs in order to renew it. So what the RPE does is that it absorbs those shed cells and neutralizes the toxins. Now this is something interesting. Why would the photoreceptor cell decide to renew the disc by shedding the disc to maintain optimality of the eye under a purely naturalistic evolutionary process? How on earth did the photoreceptor cell come to care about the rest of the eye and rest of the retina? I don't know. I don't know how they are going to attribute to it. Since we know why the RPE is there and what the choriocapillaries does, these are both placed behind the retina. If the light sensing cells were to face incoming light, meaning if the nerve cells were to be taken away, which cause blind spot, if the nerve cells were to be taken away and the light sensing cells were to see directly the source of light, the choriocapillaries and the RPE would have to be in front of the retina, and they would block most or all of the light. So if you go for a different design, if you swap the places, we'll end up going blind. But the nerve cells, which keep in mind, which causes blind spot, is comparatively transparent, and hence the inverted retina, that is our eyes, is much better than the design presented by evolutionary biologists. Because they say it's a small issue. Why couldn't God keep the wiring of the eye behind the eye? If that is implemented, we'll end up going blind. And also a human with good eyes, okay, no issues, anything as such. Both the eyes the field of vision of both the eyes covers for the blind spot of the other eye and vice versa. So if you close your left eye, you can see that your nose is covering a bit of field of vision, and if you close your right eye, you'll see that the nose is covering the other side. So we have a field of vision that is spanning from the left towards the right, and both the eyes complement each other, ruling out any effect of the blind spot. So now next up, are the eyes of the squids and the octopuses better than ours? A team of Italian biologists in 1984, they pointed out that the cephalopod eyes are physically inferior. So what it means is that in our vertebrate eyes, the initial image processing is done by the nerve cells in itself and then transmitted to the brain. But with the cephalopods, there is no such processing that takes place. So they transmit the image in a dot by dot, very delayed and unsophisticated process to the brain, and then the brain captures the image and presents the final vision. So what it turns out is that just the only difference in the squid eyes and octopus eyes is that it is inverted eyes, where the nerve cells are not causing blind spot. But if you take that out, the lack of that makes the eyes completely inferior, and they lose that capacity, they lose the complexity of the human eye. This research was there in 1984, showing that the octopus are not superior to the human eyes. And Richard Dawkins writes his book in 1986. So why would Richard Dawkins forego all the scientific literature that is there and then write his book? So there is this innate desire to construe the Christian position and deliberately create a fake image. T. Goldsmith, in his book, in his writing Optimization, Constraint and History in the Evolution of Eyes, he claims that the vertebrate eyes, quote unquote, approaches optima predicted from physics. And the vision of the eye is sharpest and most critical at the macula, which is at the center, which is located in the central fovea, and that has the highest resolution. So the blind spot area has the lowest resolution, where we have the blocking, and the highest resolution area has complete and direct access to the light at the macula. So when I read about it, my initial question was, well, why didn't God create the entire eye like a macula? Here's the thing. If the entire eye is a macula, then the amount of light and information coming into the eye would be so severe that it can cause severe sensory overload. So you cannot expect the eye to be complete macula. You need to split it apart. The highest part would be macula, and the lower resolution part would be the blind spot area. And then with the blind spot area, the nerve cells should be causing the blind spot, so that the choriocapillaries and the retinal pigment epithelium will be behind the eye. So all the aspects are optimal now. Do we have a blind spot? Yes, we have a blind spot. But is the rest of the functioning and the superior of the eye optimal? Yes, it is. Now, does the blind spot cause us any trouble? No, it does not cause any trouble. It does not cause you any harm. You can only figure out the blind spot only if you are in a very critically created situation and you try and figure it out. So this shows that optimality can be achieved in the overall self, even if certain aspects have to be compromised with. Now, Crash Course shows, he says that now we have a perfectly good and scientific explanation for how the complexity of the world came about. And he says that evolution is the answer. Bro, hold my Bible. There are two very interesting scientific conferences that had happened in 2016 and one in April this year. These are very crucial for us to know. We normally don't come across these highly scientific conference events or details. In November 2016, the Royal Society convened a meeting titled New Trends in Evolutionary Biology.
Wow.
And then in April 2019, the University of Cambridge, I forgot which college hosted it, but the University of Cambridge held another conference called Evolution Evolving, an international conference on the evolving mechanisms and theoretical framework of evolutionary biology. So what's up with all these events? And the interesting thing is that the organizers of both events are very similar. So the mix of organizers, if you look at the mixed set of organizers, are present in both the events. So why are the organizers keen on presenting some changes in evolution, or keen on bringing towards these conferences that stand out new? There are two views of evolution coming up now. One has been there since Darwin's age, and what they did is it is known as modern synthesis. So what they said is that Darwin's theory of natural selection and evolution, they couple it with genetics, they couple it with other parts of evolution and biology, and they brought together evidence from other science and presented a case for evolution. And this is known as modern synthesis. So just keep that in mind, what modern synthesis is. And this modern synthesis is what we have been learning all about evolution. This is textbook evolution. Modern synthesis is textbook evolution right until now. Alright. So here's what happened. People like I mentioned, in the mid 1970s, people like Stephen Jay Gould, Stephen Stanley, they argued that the modern synthesis, the textbook view of evolution, needs an overhaul, and it has to be replaced by extended evolutionary synthesis. We have got insights about what happened at the Cambridge event from philosopher of biology Paul Nelson, and this is what he is saying about. The contents by Gould, Stanley, and as such said that the fossil records, which is the sudden appearance of species, the Cambrian explosion, and the Rudy Raff, which is the developmental evolution, all these phenomena of development cannot be handled by modern synthesis. So we are getting more evidence as we move in, and these evidences cannot be answered with the textbook view of evolution. Okay, but the Cambrian explosion is that we expect species to develop bit by bit by bit. That's how evolution sees that, from simple to complex. But in the Cambrian evolution, all complex species, simple to the most complex one, were present in one area. So in one time frame, there is a huge explosion of species. And that is not what evolution predicts at all. Evolution looks at a very slow process spanning billions of years. Even the 14.5 billion year or the 4.5 billion year age of the Earth is not sufficient for evolution. They are looking at an infinite universe to somehow conquer an infinite universe.
This is totally theoretical.
It is, yeah, right now also still theoretical. That's where this change is happening, and that's why they say that we need an overhaul in this study and we need to bring in extended evolutionary synthesis to make sense of it. So the EES, that is the extended evolutionary synthesis, is the result of this disgruntlement. They're looking at the evidence and they're saying that this does not make sense. Our textbook evolution is not able to answer it. So Nelson asks an interesting question. Why would anyone seek a new theory if the old one is sufficient and content with? This shows that the old theory is not able to answer and is not, as Crash Course calls, a perfectly good scientific explanation for how life has progressed. And the continued effort by all the organizers in the 2016 event and the 2019 event shows that their lack of content is breeding much further. That is, they immediately want the scientific community to follow their heels. Now we need to wait and see if all these scientists want is to merely extend or overturn the entire evolutionary theory. But what we right now is very far from perfect. The modern synthesis or evolution as we know right now is far from perfect. And in the video, Crash Course says that teleological argument has been crushed by the huge weight of evolutionary biology. Again, let me show you an example. When Paul Nelson was with the event, there is a session that he records as poster sessions, where known as poster sessions, where they put up posters about their written work. The creators create stalls, and the co-authors of the work stay there. So they come and so people can walk around, see the posters, and get to know about their work. So Paul Nelson went about checking out other posters, and right across his aisle there was another poster, and the poster was teleology and evolution. So he was saying that there is a new trend coming up in the scientific field where earlier ideas about teleology that were sort of like put away and not looked into are now resurfacing. So people are saying maybe teleology might hold some answer. Maybe teleological or intelligent design might hold some key to understanding how evolution holds its place.
Yes.
Now to just highlight how the modern synthesis is not holding ground in the Cambridge event, the modern synthesis does not hold for epigenetic or non-genetic influence. So what modern synthesis says is that other than genetics, nothing can influence a speciation or any species process. So they will say that the evolutionary transformation is solely affected by permanent change, and the change that is only visible in DNA. But in the Cambridge event, Eva Jablonka of Tel Aviv University presented a case showing that epigenetic or non-genetic influences can influence life. So this is showing that certain things that were core to what we knew as textbook evolution are now being challenged by biologists from all over the world. So biologists are truly breaking away from the modern synthesis and its deficiency, and they're seeking a coherent shelter. But the issue with EES is right now is it is not coherent in itself. It is merely a drive to break away from the modern synthesis, and they haven't been able to structurize what they aim to achieve, because there is no end goal of EES right now. It can reach any extent. And also the host, like I think his name is like Kevin Leland, if I'm right, of University of St. Andrews. In a report he said that, well, we are not breaking away from evolution, but Paul Nelson says that the general consensus of the people who were supporting EES was evident that they don't want to hold on to the original view of evolution. And Gerd Muller, during the opening of the 2016 event, he started off with a stunning critique of this modern synthesis. He cited central challenges like origin of novelty and origin of complexity in his initial talk to show that the current knowledge of evolution does not hold key to understanding how life performs. And to understand the breaking away of the scientists, Nelson used an example about dating. If you're dating a person, you're sitting in a restaurant and if you're looking at someone else and you're looking at them, then that shows you're not happy or content with that person. Now you might say, well, I am with my boyfriend or I am with my girlfriend. But if you're not giving your full attention to your boyfriend or your girlfriend, you're looking at someone else, then that shows you're not happy with them.
True.
And that is happening with the modern scientific community also. If the textbook view of evolution, if the modern synthesis is able to achieve all of this, why are they even looking at the extended evolution synthesis?
It means they're not sure of whatever they have right now
they know that
in their
the
hands.
MS does not give answers. And I'm going to quickly cite some of the key challenges to evolution. Okay,
Sure.
if you want, you can just write it down and keep it in mind in your phone. The reversal in direction of biological diverse complexity of speciation. This reversal is not answered by evolution. The mass extinction and mass specialization events, evolution does not answer. The origin of sex, the non-random mutations, the results from long-term evolution experiments, the missing horizontal branches in fossil record trees, the genetic decay, inconsistency between molecular clock and fossil record dates. You can go on and on and on about the multiple challenges to evolution. So, far from being a perfect theory that explains how life progresses, evolution is still going to overlook a huge overhaul in the future, with extended evolution synthesis bringing in. So, next time if someone comes to you and says evolution is answering everything, we don't need anything more, keep in mind these two scientific conferences, the 2016 one and 2019 one in Cambridge, and you can tell to them how the modern synthesis, the textbook evolution is now being overhauled by extended evolutionary synthesis. And keep the name in mind, Stephen Jay Gould. We talked about how he brought up the example of Pandas Thumb, and also this is the same guy who is also in support of extended evolutionary synthesis.
Wow.
If you want to know more about evolution and the arguments, you can look into books like Who Was Adam? A creation model approach to the origin of humanity, Improbable Planet, More Than a Theory, Hidden Treasures in the Book of Job, Icons of Evolution, Darwin on Trial, Signature in the Cell, and Darwin's Doubt. These are books from Reasons.org and Stephen C. Meyer. So these books all answer the challenges of evolution and how not even how theistic evolution can be sufficed.
Yeah, so you can find these books and the
links
website
in the description.
Sure, description. So yeah.
I know that this was a lot to take in, but I hope guys you were able
That's
to
a lot
understand.
of information in 30 minutes. Yeah, we're
30
back again with 30 minutes.
Yeah.
So thanks, Jacob, and it was indeed a very important thing to know about all these stuff, so that next time when someone comes to us and tries to argue, we can be strong in our approach. And so thank you guys for listening to us. So in the next podcast, stay tuned for that, and we'll be addressing about the fine tuning of the universe, and we'll be taking about the multiverse. So thank you guys for listening to us, and thanks Jacob. So please like, share and subscribe. See you next week.